Captain's Log 160820. We're here now at Quinlan's Cantina, ready to embark on the away mission with Kevin, the Raider Nerd Reitzel, and Carl Wagner to explore what it is that is Lower Decks. And of course, explore the Tarantino Star Trek film. And of course, celebrate TNG. All here on Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast. G'day folks, how you doing? Welcome to Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast, brought to you by, of course, Fandom Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam O'Brien, and tonight we're going to be chatting some Star Trek with the co-founders of the FPN channel itself, Kevin, the Raider Nerd Reitzel, and Kyle Wagner. Unfortunately tonight, Mark Newbold wasn't able to join us. He's not feeling 100%, so our best wishes to our dear pal over there across the pond. But tonight we're going to be chatting to our American brothers and looking at their love of Star Trek. We're also going to be looking at, of course, the release of an animated series called Lower Decks, which is going to be an interesting look at something that was influenced by a Next Generation episode. We're also going to be looking at some news that's come out on the Tarantino Star Trek film, and we're also going to be chatting about what that could have been, what that might be, and also looking at a bit of a deep dive of classic Next Generation, all here on the FPN's Making Treks. Here's how you can subscribe and check out the amazing shows at Fandom Podcast Network. If you want to check out all the episodes of Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast, make sure you head over to Podbean by downloading the Podbean app. And that way you can subscribe to FPN with all the other shows. You can also check it out at fpnet.podbean.com and subscribe through the website that way. You can also find on that series of shows like Blood of Kings, a Highlander podcast, the weekly look at pop culture on Culture Clash. You also find Good Morning, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. You can also find What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. You can find Lethal Mullet, a 1980s action cinema podcast looking at everything from Chuck Norris, Schwarzenegger to Van Damme, and of course Scott Adkins. You can also find The Mullet Guild, a Dune podcast, as we gear towards the amazing Denis Villeneuve film coming out in December. That's all on FPN. You can catch me, The Lethal Mullet, on the socials at The Lethal Mullet on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. G'day guys, and g'day girls out there in the wild world of the final frontier. This is Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast, brought to you by, of course, the Fandom Podcast Network. Today, me, the host, Adam O'Brien, I am joined by the two co-founders of FPN, as Mark is not 100%, so he's not on today's episode, but he'll be back very, very soon. We have Kevin, the Raider Nerd Reitzel, and Kyle Wagner here to join us to celebrate the brand new animated series of Star Trek called Lower Decks. We're also going to be talking about the episode that was influenced by, which is, of course, from the Next Generation. And we're also going to be chatting some news that's come to light about the Tarantino script that's been going around for a potential film in the works. But before we do that, let's introduce our co-host today. We have, all the way from Santa Barbara, California, Kevin, the Raider Nerd Reitzel. Pal, how are you?
What's going on? I think this is my first appearance on Making Treks. I'm excited about this, man. I'm a big Trek fan.
This is the first, mate. And I tell you what, again, a deep dive is always the best way to introduce somebody into the show itself, because we get to know a little bit about your love of Star Trek and what the things that have influenced you as a fan too. So, mate, how have you been anyway?
I've been doing really good, yeah. My mom was a big Star Trek fan and used to have the original series playing in the house all the time, and that was one of my, I think that was my first foray into Trek. And then I remember seeing the original motion picture at the drive-in with my parents where I fell asleep.
The slow motion picture, as many call it, of course.
Has to start somewhere, man. Has to start somewhere. But the Star Trek space seed was set.
That's right. Now, all the way over in the other end of the United States, in a place that's named after a legendary rapper, the Flow Rider. That is, of course, Florida. We have the one, the only Carl Wagner. Buddy, how are you?
Well, I didn't realize that we were named after Flow Rider. That's new to me. Australian news, keeping it real again. That's all I'm going to say. I am doing well, other than being in the Florida hellmouth, as Kevin Reitzel calls it. But glad to be here on Making Treks for my first appearance here. And this is going to be interesting. My Trek love goes back. My first experience with Trek was Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And really fell in love with the films, and then Next Generation when it came out, and just enjoyment from there. I had a lot of friends who were really into Star Trek, especially when I was living up in Alaska at the time, guys who I worked with at the local comic book store, so we were able to share stories there. But it's such an interesting time for Trek because there's a lot of transition going on. Obviously, we're kind of into a new era of Star Trek as well. When you talk about what I'm calling right now the CBS All Access era of Star Trek, and I know we've got some serious news regarding the future of Star Trek films to discuss today too.
We do, and as you mentioned, obviously CBS All Access is the platform for these in the United States. Out here, it's different. It's Netflix and Amazon Prime for some of them. But interesting news we'll also bring to light is Paramount Plus. It may be renamed as very, very soon as well. But of course, Kyle, one of the busiest men on the planet right now, obviously coming out of tax time, to have Star Trek there sort of meet you on the other end of Moondoggy is pretty damn cool.
Oh yeah, the doggy is put away at least for a little while, so we're good there. We've been busy around here. Kevin, didn't we do something with something Tubi or Tube or something like that recently?
Yeah, Fandom Podcast Network is now on YouTube. Search out Fandom Podcast Network, and please give us a shout out, and also please subscribe so you know when new episodes hit. Because not just we're going to have live YouTube stuff going on and videos, but we're also going to be putting up our audio podcast there, and we're going to have some exclusive content.
Excellent. Now, one of the great things too about that is you can find it on many other platforms, and just follow this promo for how to do that.
I'm sitting here waiting, contemplating what's the best day. Watching that movie, I believe the moment. Wow, I'm a leader. Wow, I'm a leader. Oh, I'm a leader. Monday.
You can catch Making Tricks at fbnet.podbean.com and follow Adam at The Lethal Mullet and Mark on, of course, prefect_timing, all on the socials. Welcome back, guys. So, obviously, follow that promo. You'll subscribe to the show on, of course, the Podbean app, and Podbean's the best way to catch it. Obviously, Spotify as well. But now, you can also catch Kevin and Kyle on their social platforms. Kev, where can we find you?
Of course, you can find me on the Fandom Podcast Network, and then also on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix.
Nice. And Kyle, where can we find you?
You can find me posting all kinds of news on the Fandom Podcast Network Facebook page and Twitter, which is at FanPod Network. And of course, you can find me personally on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom.
Awesome. And of course, you can catch me, The Lethal Mullet, at The Lethal Mullet on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And of course, the regular co-host, Mark himself, you can catch at prefect_timing on, of course, the Twitter platform. But before we do anything, we've got to get into the news. We've got to head to, of course, where we're going to find this amazing stuff, which is in the newsroom. Welcome to the news, guys. We're going to be chatting about today is something that's been popped up for a little while. Quentin Tarantino obviously is huge in anybody's stretch of the imagination when it comes to film. And, of course, he's a huge buff of the original series of Star Trek. And with that love came a script that he's been putting together with Paramount. It's been hanging around for a little while. It's also a scribe of that script by the Revenant scribe himself, Mark L. Smith. And Deadline reports that these are based on an episode of Star Trek series which is all about mobsters. Now, if you remember this one, it was called A Piece of the Action. And thanks to our pals at Dark Horizons, they've given us a little bit of the background of what that might be. Now, if you could think about a Tarantino script being all about gangsters and stuff like that, Earthbound, a little bit less of the gadgetry, and actually putting an away team on an Earth that they haven't seen since the 1940s. We're looking at something that is really, really interesting. So I want to get Kevin's take on this. You've seen the article now. I mean, obviously, it gives a bit more grounding as to what we would see if this movie went ahead. What do you think of it?
I'm open to any new Trek. I'm also open to a Tarantino-style Trek. Would be very curious, especially if it's kind of like an R-rated pitch as he's been wanting to do, because I know how big fan he is of Star Trek. But he wants to tell a story in his style, and I think he's proven himself as a director, a filmmaker. But more importantly, and this is the thing that really is something that I'm most excited about, the idea of Tarantino taking part in something like this, whether he directs it or just writes it. Because, I mean, obviously he wrote True Romance, didn't direct that. Because that movie works well and his stuff is his writing. And I would absolutely love to see Trek dive into Tarantino-style writing. Because obviously the thing that is overlooked with Trek films, with Tarantino films, that Trek fans can only really look at the surface, is the violence, the language, stuff like that. But you're not really... You have to look underneath that, because he has a gift of script writing. And this is something that I first noticed and came to my brain, and my head was blown off when I saw Pulp Fiction. Not just because of the violence and how funny and quirky it was, but I go to a Tarantino film now to watch people talk to each other and listen to each other and react to each other. And he has mastered that. He is one of the directors that has made conversations in movies one of the most fascinating things to watch. And I would love to see that happen in the Trek universe with his style.
Definitely. Now, Kyle, obviously we've had previous films like Wrath of Khan tying into an old episode like Space Seed and really giving it, I suppose, a bigger breadth of imagination, really pushing out the exterior, expanding what was in those stories. Could we see that sort of thing happen here, where we get something that's small and, without all the visual effects, still be as effective with a Tarantino script?
I think there's a lot of different moving parts here at play. I think first and foremost, I think it depends on the cast. Are we talking about bringing back the Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto cast? Are we talking about an all-new cast? I think that factors into it greatly. The only concern I would have about this, and I'm a big Tarantino fan as well, and I love his dialogue, I almost think him going back to this mobster story is him limiting himself a little bit. I would love to see Tarantino explore more true science fiction as well. And I would hate for him to dive into a Trek movie where he kind of pigeonholes himself into this mobster Trek story and doesn't maybe get a chance to really explore more of the openness of adventure he could have with Trek. I think there's some interesting things there, but I mean, if I've seen him do Pulp Fiction, I've seen him do True Romance, I've seen him do that style of movie. I like to see him kind of put his toe into a different water as well. So I think it would be great either way with the dialogue and everything, but like I said, I think there's a lot of moving parts here that would need to see to play out. And, there's a big moving part of Paramount as well and what the future of Star Trek movies is going to be.
Definitely.
I have a rebuttal to that. I just have a rebuttal to that. It's a great point, Kyle. And I was thinking about what you just said. The piece of the action, though, is a world that was brought to us in the original Trek that, just like many other famous episodes that only got one shot, would love to kind of see where that world went, or if it was visited again by a crew. Personally, I would like to see a brand new crew. I don't want to see. It would be nice if they got in someone that we know that from either the J.J. Abrams verse. That's fine too. But regarding the pigeonholing thing here, if you look at his films, it's mostly about crime. That's his thing. He does a little bit that's not about. He'll do a little bit of action, revenge action, or something like that, or he'll do something like A Place in Time where it's based around something that's happening, whether it's like his latest one, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is his wheelhouse. He doesn't go do romantic drama. He's not a sci-fi guy, but that's what he wants to do. He wants to take this beloved sci-fi thing and see if that he can meld both of them. So in a way, I don't see it him else limiting. I think he's actually stretching out.
That's a very good point. I think one of the things too you both brought up there is the fact that, you know, he is bound to drama, and in that, not just the crime, but the inherent clashes between people in dialogue. That's, I think, the violence is a window dressing in his films.
Yeah, look, exactly. If you look at his films, pick any of his main films. Let's look at Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. What people forget is 90% of those films is dialogue.
Yeah.
And then when he shows you the violence, it is quick, it is harsh, it is brutal.
Yeah.
And that's what leaves an impression on people. But look at the rest of the film. It's people talking to each other. It's people talking about each other. It's people scheming behind each other's back. I mean, if you look at it too, even Kill Bill, which has probably the most action in it, there's so much dialogue, so much people talking to each other.
Yeah, and I almost think that the fight themselves is in the dialogue. It's more, you know, it gets worked out almost like a sword fight in some ways, you know. You know, there's a clash there, but they all come to an end, a crescendo, a climax. And I think one of the things you brought up there too, Kevin, that's really important is the way that he portrays the gore, violence in a way that leaves an impression. It's a little bit like the film by Edward Zwick called Glory. Now, that's always said that's a gory movie. I always heard that for years. When I finally saw it in the mid-90s, because I hadn't seen it before, there's a shot at the start of the cannon ball going through somebody's head, which is, yes, very gory, but that's it. The rest of it was pretty much implied or vice versa. And like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Alien and stuff like that, if you imply it after there's been such a precedence of violence, that's, I think, what Tarantino gets away with. And I think in this story, this is something Tarantino was quoted as saying in another interview. He said, I'm going to show the horror of space and science fiction. So I think that's what he may have meant. Maybe he's going to bring through some type of, event that happens by these gangsters on that planet. But
it's funny you say that about the implied violence he's really good at, because Jackie Brown, you get that. I don't know if you noticed that, but like when, was it Chris Rock, when he's killed, you see it from a distance. Or is it not Chris Rock? It's, what's his name?
Guy from Fifth Element.
Yes.
Chris Tucker. Chris Tucker.
From a distance. Chris Tucker, thank you. When you see Bridget, what's her name? The blonde girl.
Fonda.
Bridget Fonda. That's not, you only see part of it. You don't see her actually getting shot. You just see De Niro turning around. When De Niro gets shot, you see it from the back of the van, and you don't see like the gore in that. So he knows how to do it both ways.
Yeah, what do you think, Carl?
Yeah, no, I agree with Kevin, and like I said, it's an interesting place for Tarantino to go. I guess it's just, my question would be for a lot of Star Trek fans: are they ready for this turn? It's a big different piece for Star Trek fans. So I'm curious, and especially where Star Trek kind of is right now with its fandom and how people are kind of reacting to the Alex Kurtzman era of Star Trek at the moment. I would go in with an open mind. I would like to see what Tarantino can do with the property. As far as the implied violence, I think he would have to exercise that a little bit more in a Star Trek realm, because I think the biggest challenge for Tarantino to do Star Trek, unless he gets permission from Paramount and whoever to just say, go full force, he's going to have a little bit of a balancing act to do. And I guess it just all depends on how much support he has for his vision from the studio.
I can answer your question right now. From what I've seen and from what I've heard from my Star Trek fans and paying attention to what they're saying, and my friends on Facebook and Twitter, of what they're saying about this, is that the majority of fans don't want this and are either / don't want it or are not ready for it. And then there's a group of smaller percentage of fans that are like, yeah, why not? We're open. Let's do it. Star Trek fans are very, very protective of their property.
No, I have,
which leaves a lot of room for not being open to new things, and we may touch on that very soon.
I have to say, the people that I've talked to about it are about the same. They're very, on the fence when it comes to if you're putting such a huge curveball into Star Trek, the likes of Tarantino. What would it be like? Would it be a bigger thing than what JJ has done? Mind you, all of them hate what JJ has done with the Kelvinverse, so it kind of gives you an inkling about where we're heading. Now, obviously, tonight we're going to be moving into our main section as we go into the 10 forward to chat about Lower Decks. But before we do, we thought we'd get a little bit of an idea about what Kevin and Kyle enjoy in, of course, the Star Trek universe. Let's start with you, Kyle, this time. What is your favourite episode? You're only allowed to pick one of Star Trek, could be any of them, and why is it so powerful for you?
It's interesting because I would still have to lean towards Best of Both Worlds, Part 1 and 2. I mean, that was just so impactful because I really think that was a Trek we had never really seen before, and I think it was a changer for a very large game changer for Star Trek and how it approached things. Next Generation was definitely my kind of Star Trek that was my age and everything. I enjoyed the original series. I enjoyed the original movies. I mean, and if you're going to talk about the movies, Wrath of Khan, by far, movie-wise, is my favorite there. As far as my favorite series, though, I'm going to have to say DS9 is my favorite Star Trek series. I think it was so intelligently written, and I think there's been a big appreciation for DS9 now compared to when it first came out. And especially when you go back, I think a lot of people were initially turned off by DS9 when it first came out, and then especially once you got into the Dominion more and some things like that, and then you saw how even in season 1 they were laying the groundwork for the entire run. It worked so well, and Kevin just was showing off up on cam the wonderful documentary What We Left Behind, covering everything DS9. And I also think one of the things with DS9 was I think even more than Next Gen, the cast just was so diverse and so different. And I'm a big Avery Brooks fan. I loved him as Hawk for Spencer for Hire. I just think there was very little they were afraid to do with that show. I think they took risks that I don't think any other Star Trek show has really taken in a very long time.
Nice. Kevin, what about yourself, mate? Obviously, you're a huge Trek fan as well. What is your favourite episode and why?
I would have to say Star Trek: The Next Generation is my bread and butter. Definitely. It's really what brought me into Trek, and I will love it because of that. However, last 10 years rewatching Deep Space Nine, it's like right there, man. It's right there, and it's threatening. It's knocking on the door saying, "Hey, Kevin, we're going to be your favorite Star Trek series now, right?" It's like right there. And so, regarding my favorite episode, I just want to mention real quick with the movies, my favorite Star Trek movie actually is Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, the last film of the original cast. It's still my favorite. I absolutely love that film. But regarding an episode, my favorite Star Trek episode for the longest time was a Next Gen episode called Yesterday's Enterprise, where we got to see and it was only in one episode. I wish it was a double episode because it was that good. It's where we got to see an alternate universe of the Star Trek Enterprise crew with Tasha Yar coming back and the Enterprise C and all that kind of stuff, and it was just so good. But right now, I think my favorite episode right now, and it's eclipsed that, is a season 1 episode of Deep Space Nine called Captive Pursuit, which introduced my favorite character in Star Trek, and he only got one appearance, and he was also the first visitor from the Gamma Quadrant through the wormhole, and that's the character of Tosk that was being hunted by the Hunters. And he struck up a unlikely but very cool friendship with O'Brien, who helped him in assisting in his continuous escape from the Hunters. And I obviously have been influenced by that episode very much.
I've seen Tosk around a few times. I do believe he may have an Instagram page, folks, I think.
Yeah, Yes, I do. About maybe, I don't know, I want to say 5 to 7 years ago, I started taking a Tosk action figure, Star Trek Tosk action figure with me wherever I went. And I've traveled with them overseas, even to Australia, across the country, here in the States, over in Europe and Germany and Sweden and, UK and all over Scotland and Ireland. I started an Instagram account, and his name is Traveling Tosk, and he's been having a lot of fun eluding the hunters and enjoying planet Earth. So look for him on Instagram at Traveling Tosk.
Nice. All right, folks, we're going to head into the time machine. We're going to deep dive here, and we're going to look at a character at a time in the Star Trek universe before we head into 10 Forward. Here we go, folks. We're doing a deep dive today, and actually it's influenced by Kevin himself here. We're going to pick Season 1 of TNG and look at some of the most interesting moments. One of those is, of course, Tasha Yar, who's a character who I think was pretty much the heart and soul of some of those episodes in the first season. And, of course, her bleak and very definite exit, obviously at the character's death. Really, I think, Denise Crosby played it so well, so hardcore, as a security operative in this, series, that it showed just how tough space can be. You don't know what's out there, and you didn't take things for granted after that too. So, Kev, let's start with you. What are your thoughts of the first season to TNG? Best moments, moments that you thought could have a bit more opportunity? Take it away.
Season 1 of TNG, a lot of people would probably say is a tougher watch because it was kind of finding its leg. Encounter Farpoint, the 2-part episode, first episode, which is important, introduces the crew. But at least we got reference to that later on, and we got the introduction of one of the favorite villains of Star Trek, which is Q himself. But the Skin of Evil episode where Tasha Yar dies, that was kind of a big deal to kill off a main character. Whether the behind-the-scenes drama that went on and she either wanted to leave the show or they wanted to replace her, it doesn't matter. The fact is that they went there. They killed someone off, which the original series did not do with the original cast. Of course, that's what the red shirts were for. So, I mean, it's a tough... There's a couple of really creepy, weird episodes too, like Code of Honor. That's just really hard to watch, but there's a lot of character development and a lot of Star Trek lore that is referred to later on that's interesting. So
definitely. Kyle, your thoughts on episodes in the season?
Yeah, I agree with Kevin. A lot of people consider season 1 kind of a tough watch, as it's really going to find its legs, establish its characters. I mean, let's not forget the pressure season 1 of Next Generation was under, just because it was the first Star Trek for so long, and it had so many expectations. And the thing about this about Star Trek Next Generation too is it was also really kind of one of the first shows to really fully dive into syndicated television, at least here in the U.S., which really had kind of just been feeling its legs out a little bit. But on Star Trek The Next Generation was really, I think, the first thing, Kevin, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it felt like the first really big syndicated television series.
Yeah, it went straight into syndication, if I remember correctly. That was a big deal. It didn't have, it wasn't on NBC or it wasn't on CBS. It was like, if it was, it didn't air till later. But yeah, it was made for syndication, basically.
Yeah, and there were some interesting episodes. One I always kind of liked was When the Bow Breaks, when you got the planet inhabitants are sterile and they want to adopt children from the Enterprise by force. I always thought that was just kind of an interesting episode, just with how it dealt with that kind of situation. But I think really it's not so much standout episodes from season 1. It's more of the moments with the characters in season 1 as we got to learn these episodes. Hyde and Q comes to mind when Q is trying to tempt Riker into joining the Q Continuum as well. Right. And then, I think the thing with season 1 too is it really is kind of got that weight of what happened with Tasha Yar and Denise Crosby choosing to leave the series, probably really regretting that decision after some time, especially for considering the reason she chose to leave the series. And I think if we were ever to go back and get the full truth of that, I think it was probably a mutual decision, because one of the reasons she claimed, at least for a while, that she left the series is she had done a Playboy spread, and she was very happy with how that came, and it got her some movie offers and things like that, and she wanted to explore it. I don't necessarily think that Gene and the rest of the Star Trek production side were real thrilled with her when that spread came out.
Yeah, but they were able to, invite her back to Star Trek. Where she came back as the Romulan, and of course she came back in the future the episode that I liked. So, yeah.
And to be honest, I always have thought that her death was a weak death. And I mean, a lot of fans and jokes have been made about her death on the show and how it went down, death by mud monster.
The mud monster. Yeah, Armis, the skin of evil. But it did end good, though. The first season did end on conspiracy, which they didn't really touch on a lot later at all, about how there was these aliens that were taking over crucial members of the Federation leadership. And then it ended with the neutral zone, which invited us to be scared of the Romulans again.
No, it definitely ended strong.
And of course, one of the biggest things this gave us was the new type of Klingon called the Ferengi, and they were after Dallas.
Yeah, they were supposed to be very. They're supposed to be very scary with those whips and stuff, and they weren't, because they were kind of short.
Yep. And I think, too, one of the funny things is, they didn't expect them to be the comedic sort of element that they became. And even more human when we got into DS9 with Quark. I mean, it became a human experience, as in, we sort of lived through what he went through there on the promenade.
Yeah, Quark was one of the best written characters of Deep Space Nine. You really got a great look into the Ferengi culture and world, and how deep that culture actually is, even though they are greedy, most of them are, but it was nice to see different facets to that culture. And Armin Shimmerman as Quark is just golden.
Oh yeah. Now, before we go any further, folks, want to thank some dear friends out there who have also highlighted that there's some great fan films on offer on the streaming platforms too. So you can check out some of the new ones now directly on streaming, and they've even got their own little fan film streaming service, and I think it's attached to Tubi, I believe. So you can see I'm trying to think of the name of the ones I just saw this morning on there, but I'll put links up later anyway for you. But it's all attached to Tubi and FilmRise. So go and check those out. All right, let's head into 10 forward, folks, and chat some Lower Decks.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to the Fandom Podcast Network and all of the other awesome shows we have to offer. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, our weekly pop culture news podcast. Blood Kings, our Highlander podcast. Couch Potato Theater, our podcast celebrating our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite pop culture topics. End Zone, the NFL podcast. Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville podcast. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our Doctor Who podcast. Lethal Mullet, a 1980s and 90s action film podcast. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. And our newest show, Making Treks, a new Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. You can enjoy all of these great Fandom Podcast Network shows on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. Fandom Podcast Network is also on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. You can also find us on Facebook under Fandom Podcast Network. You can also email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter under Fandom Podcast Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, folks, we're going to look at an original episode of The Next Generation, which Kev's been kindly able to find and show us as an influence for the new series. And it's something that is going to give you a bit of an idea about where this whole new series came from. So, take it away, Kevin.
Yeah, so Star Trek Lower Decks, which is the brand new series on CBS All Access, the animated series, brought to you by the creators of Rick and Morty.
The people who were involved in Rick and Morty have created Lower Decks.
Yes. Well, this series was inspired by a fan favorite episode from season 7 of Star Trek The Next Generation called Lower Decks. And I did a little interesting research, because when you talk about people's favorite episodes, Lower Decks always comes up. Because what it does is it gives you an insight to the other crew members that are on the USS Enterprise, not just the bridge crew or the senior staff. And you get a little bit. It's kind of like it kind of reminded me of Data's Day, where you got to see a what life was like on the Enterprise when you didn't have to deal with, Borg killing you, trying to kill you, or Klingon drama here and there, Romulan drama. This was one of those episodes that was like a bottle episode just on the Enterprise, and so they didn't have to go to like out spend extra money on sets. They just had to have a really good script with some great actors in it. And it's a mission of the Enterprise is seen through the eyes of some of the junior officers who are up for promotion, and questions of duty and honor arise among them, such as a Bajoran whom Worf is designated to be promoted to officer. And this Bajoran is the key character in this episode. And what's interesting about this episode is that Sito Jaxa, who is played by Shannon Phil, is this Bajoran character. And she was originally seen in a previous episode where she was a Star Trek cadet friend of Wesley Crusher, and their cadet friends tried to cover up the accidental death of one of their friends, and it went through a whole tribunal, and people got in trouble, and she was part of that, and now she's on the Enterprise. And there's a great scene where Picard dresses her down and questioning her and trying to see what type of person she's made of. But what really makes this episode is these junior officers who are friends doing stuff together, trying to figure out what's going on with this mission that's happening with the senior staff, the main crew that we do know, and that Sito Jaxa is pulled into this mission while the other junior officers, one of them is working in engineering. He's the Vulcan. He's working with the Geordie. And then you got the young officer who wants to come into training, and he's trying to get to know William Riker, but William Riker thinks that he's a bootlicker, And then we get is it Nursagawa? I think it is. She's up for a promotion. She's one of the people that has also become friends with Crusher, and so they're friends. But what's interesting about this is that this episode gets real. We just talked about death earlier on in the first season, losing one of the main crew members. Well, Sito Jaxa gets killed at the end of this thing. We don't see it. It's mentioned because she is asked to do a secret mission with pretending to be a Bajoran prisoner with a Cardassian that is working with the Federation. And she knows going into it, it's a dangerous mission. And Picard, after he dresses her down, approaches her and saying, I actually wanted you on the Enterprise because I saw what you could do. And she volunteered for the mission, and she dies. And so this brings, like I said, it gets real here. And one of the best scenes in this episode, we know that our bridge crew, our senior officers, love to play poker together. Well, the junior officers also get together and play poker. And the thing that brings them together is one of the guys that works in 10 Forward, who's a civilian. He's friends with them, but he also knows Will, and he's able to call Will by his first name. And he plays, I think his name is Ben. His name is Ben, and he's playing poker with him. But there's a great scene where you see both junior officers and senior officers playing poker at the same time, and the cuts and the edits go from like junior officer to senior officers as they're having like similar discussions. It's brilliant. It's absolutely awesome. And also the director of this one is Gabrielle Beaumont, who has done a lot of episodic television. She's done Hill Street Blues, Remington Steele, L.A. Law. She's done several episodes of Next Generation. Obviously knows how to direct drama, and that's why this episode was so good. And it's, if you look at list of top 10, top 15, top 20 episodes of Star Trek Next Generation, I found 3 that Lower Decks is in the top 5. And this is why this concept was so inspirational to the animated series that's just come out. Kyle, what do you think of that? You've seen it.
I think it's one of the best episodes of Next Generation, without a doubt, because it takes you to a place that you've never really seen before. With what you always get the main crew, and to get this, you mentioned the actor Ben. The actor who played him was Bruce Beatty, and he's one of those that guy actors. Like you don't know who he is, but you see his face, and you're like, I've seen him in other things. He doesn't have a really big IMDb, he has 32 credits, but he's been in a lot of real interesting things, including the movie Falling Down. He's also been in NYPD Blue, ER. He was in the movie The Negotiator with Samuel L. Jackson. He was in a couple episodes of Grey's Anatomy, the show Southland, the show House of Lies, the show Glee. He was in the movie Straight Outta Compton. He's also done episodes of...
He's definitely that guy.
I loved having him there. But yeah, no, just to see this alternate side that we don't get to see that often. Every once in a while you might have an episode where there's a member of the lower crew, or is that somebody who you don't see a while, like an ensign or something, kind of have a smaller role interacting with somebody for a little bit. But to have this episode focused on these characters, I think it was something a lot of Star Trek fans had wanted to see for a while, to kind of just see what it's like for other people on the Enterprise besides the main crew. And I think it really filled a hole and a gap that had been in Star Trek for a good while, Kevin.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the cast of this episode was great, of the characters that did the Lower Decks. I liked Ensign or Alexander Enberg, who played the Vulcan Tarek. He was just great in that. And yeah, Patty Yatsutuke, who's near Sagawa. Just awesome. And then I love Dan Gauther, who played Sam Lavelle. He was the young junior soon to be a commanding officer, which is where he wants to go command, just trying to get in the good gracious of Riker, and he's just like failing miserably.
So this is obviously a huge thing, the fact that you can actually have a crew outside of what you usually used to. We have this family that we used to in TNG, and it's nice to see that they've got such support in different levels of the ship.
I wanted to mention, too, I don't remember the name of the episode, so forgive me, Star Trek Voyager fans, but there was an episode of Star Trek Voyager, maybe actually more than one, where they kind of touched on the lower decks of Voyager. And I remember specifically that there was an episode that had a guy who was played by Tom Morello from the band Rage Against the Machine. And he was in there, and I remember finding, oh my God, that's so funny. He must be a big Star Trek fan. And so it's been touched on after that, but not to, obviously, the degree as the new animated series.
He was also in Star Trek Insurrection. A lot of people,
yes.
See that. Played, I can't remember what was the alien planet they went to, but he was one of the aliens on the planet. So, so very interesting that you do that. Obviously, it's influenced this 2020 adult animation comedy that we've got, and of course created by Mike McMahon. And that is, of course, Star Trek Lower Decks, which we were about to chat about. Now, all three of us have seen this series. I've seen at least the first episode and a little bit of the second. But you guys have actually seen quite a bit of it, haven't you?
Just first 2 episodes, because as of this recording, the second episode was released a few days ago. They're releasing it every week.
Okay.
And there's 10 total episodes in season 1.
Now, obviously, we have had an animated series in the past, the Star Trek animated series from 73 and 74, if I remember right. And it's being released on DVD and Blu-ray. Kev's holding up the DVD box set. Aren't they beautiful, these old sets, and the nice boxes they had? And
yeah, there's a Blu-ray set too, but I love the original DVD release of the animated series. It's gorgeous, and I didn't upgrade to Blu-ray because I like this thing so much.
It's so nice. Have you got the TOS ones there as well, in the original cases?
Yes, I got the original cases right behind
how
me.
good are they? They are fantastic. Honestly, look, I've got the only ones I got in the boxes were the ones from Enterprise, which is in the silver case. Yeah, look at how good is that? They're just
love these things. When they first released these on DVD, and was it early 2000s? I think these came out. Just gorgeous. And then of course, they released them again on Blu-ray and full sets and stuff. But I just love these. They're so cool. I can't relinquish these.
And the thing is, it's a far more collectible thing to put them in those nice cases that they came in, even up to the DS9 ones. I mean, the thing is, folks, they were expensive in these boxes when they came out. I mean, they were not cheap.
Like pushing $100 for us, maybe more for you guys.
Yeah. A box set was about $135, $140 out here. But what's interesting is, a lot of people said, oh, well, look, I'm not going to pay that. I'll just wait for the mass market ones to come out. They came out, they're only about $30 cheaper. They weren't that much cheaper. But now those sets are about $300 or $400 out here.
Yeah, they're a hard find. So they are, when you find them, if you can find them at a decent price, snag them.
Oh, definitely. Now, what's great about it too is, if we look at the animated series out here in Australia, that one was played on both afternoons as a serious sort of, I suppose, for adults version of Star Trek, but also in the mornings on a Saturday morning. So you can see that it can kind of relate to the different areas of fandom. But this new series, I will give it this much from what I've seen, obviously the first episode, it won't just be geared towards kids.
Oh.
It's going to be geared towards all of us.
This is not a kid-friendly show. You are.
Which, by the way, I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, same here.
I thought this was being, that's going to be an animated series. Now we know Rick and Morty has got stuff for adults, from what I've heard.
Rick and Morty is not for younger kids. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Okay, so there you go. I didn't know that. I was expecting something a lot kid friendly, but this is animation for adults, straight up. The humor.
I'm just going to throw this out. Too. If you want something for kids, they are working on a Star Trek animated for kids that's going to be on Nickelodeon, which is Star Trek Prodigy, which is at San Diego, the virtual San Diego Comic-Con, they've described as Star Trek meets Space Cases. So that is coming, and it's going to be on Nickelodeon, which I'm sure will end up on the CBS app as well. But so that is coming. But as far as Lower Decks goes, this is for the adults.
So this just cracks me funny straight away. The animation studio's name is, are you ready for it? Drum roll, folks. Titmouse.
Yep.
Which is the name of an actual mouse.
Now, I'm just
Adam's laughing for some reason. I guess
it's an Australian.
I don't get it, Kyle.
It's an Australian thing. I'm guessing. Too long in lockdown in Australia. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I don't know why titmouse is funny.
No idea.
But I will say this. Now, folks, we're all fans of a certain Amazon Prime show, which has Carl Urban going, "Hey, mate, going, you're right. I'm from London, right?" That is, of course, the amazing. Come on. You know what I'm going out here. You know with the show I'm about to mention here.
Yes,
The Boys.
The Boys?
Yep.
Yeah.
There is a Boys actor in this cast. It is, of course, Jack Quaid.
Yes, son of Randy Quaid.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's funny is he plays the absolute straight man in this series.
He kind of reminds me of what's the character in Futurama? Zach Brannigan kind of reminds me. Is Zach Brannigan?
Oh, I must correct you. It is actually Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan.
That's right. You are correct.
Ah, okay, cool. Well, anyway, Adam, you saw it first, or you've seen the first episode. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Look, I think the thing is, it didn't excite me. Is the only thing that this thing hasn't done. The humor's fine. I thought it was pretty funny for what it was. It was almost heading into that sort of Adult Swim sort of area as far as I saw it as humour. So it's down in that sort of, for me, Robot Chicken sort of area. But the animation's really, really good. And as far as looking at a different set of characters, it's nice to not just have the captain and the usual round table.
Kyle, what was your impression? You've seen both episodes, right? Which is the first episode was Second Contact, and the newest one that just came out as of this recording is Envoys.
First of all, I was skeptical going into this. I have experience with Rick and Morty. I find Rick and Morty to have some absolutely amazing, well-written and intelligent episodes that are hilarious. And then there's just episodes of Rick and Morty that you're just like, you can feel your brain cells dying as you watch it. So with this, I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but so far through the first 2 episodes, I've really enjoyed it. And I think what I like about it is that it's staying within the Trek realm, but having so much fun with it. And Kevin, I know we talked a little bit about this on the most recent Culture Clash we did. One of my favorite things is the opening credit sequence. It is it's classic because it tries to capture that magic of a Star Trek opening sequence and then just throws it all out the window. One of my favorite scenes, which I know is also one of yours in that opening sequence, is when they come across the Borg cube fight and they get there with the Romulans. They get there, they kind of see what's going on, and they just immediately turn the ship around. But the other thing that sells us so well is the incredible voice acting that is done in this, especially by Tawny Newsome, who is Ensign Mariner, who's kind of your central figure in this. Obviously Jack Quaid as well, but you also have Noel Wells as Ensign Tendi, Eugene Cordero as Ensign Rutherford, and also Jerry O'Connell as a voice of one of the more senior crew in this. And what I find interesting, too, is it's hilarious, and they make some great fun at Star Trek's expense, but it still feels like it's being a little respectful to that, but it's also developing a story plot that's going to run through the season involving Ensign Mariner, and that's going to, I think that's very intelligent in how they're handling that, Kevin.
Yeah, I want to touch on Tawny Newsome. You could see her as one of the leads in the new Space Force series, with is it Steve Carell on Netflix, which is very funny. Yeah, so the one thing that if you only watch the first episode and judge it by that, you can judge the humor one way, and I'm going to touch on that in a second, but they actually start developing the characters in the background, especially the main character, or one of the main characters, Ensign Mariner, who is in the lower decks for a reason. We find out that the ship is commanded by her mother, and she has a husband who's an admiral, and there's a very funny scene at the end of the episode 1. But in the second episode, we get a lot more character development about Ensign Mariner. And the funny thing about Ensign Mariner and Ensign Boimer, played by Jack Quaid, is that Ensign Boimer, he's wanting to go into command. That's what he's training for. But he's such a by-the-book guy, and he's trying to impress everyone. But we get the feeling that Ensign Mariner has actually lived some life. She's actually had experience. She's developed. She knows a lot about alien races and cultures because she's gotten out there. She's gotten into trouble doing it, which has knocked her down to lower decks. And so it's an interesting friendship between these two that I really like. And like I said, you touched on the opening sequence, Kyle, which was great because you get a sense for this crew. But I want to talk about the ship real quick. The USS Cerritos, which is a California class starship. I love the California love here because Cerritos is a name of a city in like LA area, Southern California, and then the California class starship. I am in love with this starship and the way that it looks. It's got a very simplistic design where the nacelles are underneath the dish, but then it's got that cool thing that connects the two nacelles together, where that might be like it looks like it's either the shuttle launching room or like an engineering area. It's so simplistic, but I absolutely love it. I think it's great.
I just want to say, I just love going and looking at the warp core.
Yeah.
Doesn't it look like a ship from Wrath of Khan? Well, it really does.
It's similar, but it's a different design. And I tell you right now, if Eagle Moss releases this ship, I want to get it. I think it's gorgeous. But I want to talk about the animation. The animation, going into this series, I didn't know Rick and Morty. Everyone's saying, Kevin, you'll love Rick and Morty. And I was just like, whatever. They got so many stuff to watch. But I was apprehensive going into this. I didn't go in with high expectations. I think Kyle and I were on the same plane with her. But after the first episode, I was sold. I thoroughly enjoy this. It was a breath of fresh air, and the animation I thought was great. I love it. It's very detailed. I love the fact that they're really paying homage to Star Trek and the Next Generation area. Not area, but the Next Generation era, which I think is great because it takes place soon after that. Kyle?
Finish your thought, Kevin, but when you're done, there's something else I want to bring up, too.
Okay, sure. The animation I think is gorgeous, but I want to mention something about humor. I love the humor that they bring up in this because, honestly, I think Star Trek needs more humor. Recent Star Trek has been too stuffy. Mm-hmm. It's been too serious. It's been too... grim. It's been but it's done well, and it's good, and it's entertaining to watch. But Star Trek needs to be fun sometimes. It needs to also, being a Star Trek fan, you need to be able to poke fun of it, at anything and show that. And I love that they're doing that, but I think they're doing it with a certain amount of respect, and they're not crossing the line. And I love it.
A couple things. First, on your comment about comedy. Yeah, as far as more newer, recent Trek, the only place that we've really seen them have it felt like they were having a little bit more fun was some of the short Treks that they've done. I think they're... But in this, too, I want to talk about some of the senior staff real quick, because you've got Captain Carol Freeman, who is voiced by Don Lewis, who a lot of you should remember from the show A Different World. Also, you have...
What's that?
It was a spin-off show of The Cosby Show. Very popular. So I believe her character's name was Jolisa, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, I think you're right. Yes, that was a great series.
Also, Phil Lamar as the Admiral, who is Captain Carol Freeman's wife and Ensign Mariner's husband and Ensign Mariner's father. We've only seen him in one episode, but it was a classic moment at the end of the episode.
Phil Lamar is a really experienced voice actor. He obviously has done work in front of the camera with Mad TV and stuff, but he's done stuff for Star Trek Clone Wars. He was in Futurama as several main characters there. He was also Marvin, who got his face shot off in Pulp Fiction.
But lastly, I just real quick, Adam, I want to single out Jerry O'Connell as Commander Jack Ransom, because he is so over the top and so hilarious. And in the second episode, when Ensign Rutherford is going through ensign training, and the scene where, wow, never have that many children be ejected from the ship. Blow that up. Let's see if we can get more this time. But just the craziness of the humor.
It was a Kobayashi Maru training sequence, and it's so funny how that scene played out, because everyone else was obviously holograms in the hologram suite or whatever it was. And it was so funny because they made mention of oh my God, the kindergarten's getting killed, and oh my God, all the kids got sucked out into space. No, that's never happened
remember,
before.
Always use the Janeway maneuver.
The Janeway maneuver.
Now,
so I've seen several Star Trek fans just immediately write this off, and in a way, it kind of makes me sad. But if you can watch a couple episodes and be fine with it and be done, it's fine. You gave it a shot. But I think that for those of you that gave up on it too quickly, give it a chance, because after the second episode, you can tell they're building on something. Each of these episodes is not a one-shot episode, to where nothing else is going to be referenced before. That's the feeling that I got, because the second episode, it's starting to get deeper here, and it's building up to something, especially with our main character and what's going to happen with this. Because you get the feeling Ensign Mariner has been demoted a few times for obvious stuff, because she's such a free spirit, and she kind of reminds me of the character in Real Genius that talks really fast, Kyle. The girl character, she's got something. She just can't get everything out when she wants to. But it's one of her personality quirks that I
think the fact that she gets along with the Klingons so well is also a key.
Oh my God, that was so funny, and the whole thing with the Ferengi at the end, it's just it was great. So yeah, and there's so many call-outs, not to just Next Generation, but classic Star Trek too, especially with aliens. And
but there's also one that's straight in the face if you've seen it. Particularly, I'm shocked that Kyle has not spoken of this yet, and it's a very famous voice actor in this cast too. Kyle, you should know this one, Jesse Harnell. I'm sure you know this guy.
The name rings. Jess Harnell.
Jess Arnell, who's Ironhide in Transformers in the movies and in the animated. Wacko Warner, he's been in. He plays Abraham Lincoln and Mr. Peabody and Sherman as well. Crash Bandicoot, Star Trek Lower Decks. He plays the role of Corrin. This is a Dune reference. The Battle of Corrin.
There you go.
There you go. But yeah, very famous and very good friend of Mark Hamill, this guy. So if you remember back years ago, in I think it was 2001, Mark Hamill put together a movie called Comic Book The Movie. And that was one where it's basically about he's playing a fan who is going to the convention and to basically rip it bare for what it was and really show up. This is a documentary.
I remember that one, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a fun piss take, basically, of the sort of area of fandom. And at the end, you got a second disc which had the entire voice cast. And Jesse Arnell played his cameraman, and he's hilarious in front of the camera. And for Kev, this guy really does look like he's from LA Guns.
Nice. I highly recommend this series. I'm sold. I'm going to continue watching it. I'm really excited about it. This kind of is a shot in the arm that I think Trek needs, and I think that as always, believe it or not, some Star Trek fans are being overly critical on this. Go figure.
Carl?
Yeah, no, I am been pleasantly surprised by Lower Decks. Again, I didn't go in with high expectations, but I didn't go in with a negative mindset either. I'm like, okay, let's see what we got. And so far, the first 2 episodes have been highly enjoyable. It's kind of a breath of fresh air that I think we really needed. And I understand where it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. I get it, but you know what? Like Kevin said, give it at least a shot. It's one of these things. Give it the first 2 episodes. That's all I'm asking. It's 22 minutes an episode. You're not investing a ton of time here. Give it the first 2. If it's still not your thing, hey, all the more power to you. But you might be pleasantly surprised and at least enjoy a lot of the references they put in this show.
I always say give a new series at least 4 episodes, maybe 6 at the most, So, yeah.
For me, I'm going to be actually giving this one a little bit more of a go. I have not written it off, but I'm just not excited by it. I think that's the thing is I need to see more. I need to really experience more in that universe.
Did the humor at all hit you, or did you not get it?
No. The humor for me needs to be a bit more striking. Needs to take a bit more chances. There's many other sci-fi series. Even Firefly was funnier than this in that regard. But what I'm saying is I think it really needs to maybe take a chance to be even more provocative in that way, and then it'll get the Australian audience, because we're used to a little bit more in-your-face humour, and I think that's what I want. Right. But the rest of the show is perfectly fine as far as I see it. I really enjoy it.
Give it the second episode.
I'm going to give it a shot.
I think you'll enjoy the humour in the second episode a little bit more.
So, the biggest thing here, like the Hallenbach scale, we have the Klingon palm on Making Treks. Out of the Klingon palm, what does it get, Kevin, out of 5?
Oh, out of 5, based on the first 2 episodes, I'm going to give it, I'm going to go as high as a 3.5, 4 right now out of 5, because I was thoroughly enjoyed in it. And that's how I'm going to judge the first 2 episodes right now. I was excited for the second episode. I was after the first one. So that's where I'm at now. It might change after watching all 10, but that's where I'm at right now.
Nice call.
I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5 as well. I think there's some foundation there. I was excited for the second episode too. Let's see where it goes. I think that's the biggest thing is which direction do they take this? There's a lot of ways it can go. I think the one thing when you're dealing with animation like this is that you can bring a joke too far into the ground. And that's the one risk I think with Lower Decks right now is they could run with. But I have a lot of confidence in what they're doing right now.
I haven't seen that done yet. They've been pretty clever of opening up a lot of new doors for different jokes and gags. But it's not like I know you've had a problem with Family Guy about that, and I've seen the same thing. They'll just drive a joke until it's just not funny anymore. But I haven't seen them do that yet with the Lower Decks.
And the big thing is, it is already renewed for a second season. It's going to be a 12-episode second season.
Oh, very cool.
And they're funny. They always renew before it's even out.
That's why they have this thing called test audiences.
Yes, I know. Anyway, but I must say, look, give it a shot. I'm going to do that too, and I'm sure Mark right now is watching those episodes in the UK as well. But if you want to see Jack Quaid joined Bob what's his name? Bill the Butcher on The Boys. Go and check that out very soon on Prime as well. That's going to be happening in the next, I think it's the next month.
September.
We'll get it on The Boys.
Yeah,
September.
November? September.
I think it's
There
Labor
you
Day
go.
weekend here in the States, Kevin, that it debuts.
Oh, wow.
Oh, very cool. Can't wait.
Only around the
The
corner.
Boys it was so much fun that first season. I can't wait for season 2.
They're going to kill some soups. But I want to thank Kevin and Kyle for being on here, enjoying a little bit of Star Trek tonight. And, of course, you've got to check out, of course, the Union Fed show, which looks at all of this and more. The Lower Decks looks at Discovery and, of course, Orville, which I've actually sent a nice little pic to. I think it was Kyle yesterday. You can now buy the blaster rifles from Orville through some of the new prop stores and stuff like that too. Did you see that I sent you?
Yeah,
Kyle?
I saw that. You didn't tell me where they were, though. You just sent me a picture saying you can find these now.
I'll have to find the link now. Might have been on Amazon, actually. I think it was when I was surfing through Amazon, because I've got sent from the UK the Queen Flash Gordon album for $17 Australian, and it's about 145.
Real quick, The Boys season 4, September 4th.
Oh, closer than I thought.
Around the corner. Any parting thoughts, gentlemen? Kevin.
I just want to say thank you for having me on for Making Treks. I'm glad and very proud of this new addition to the Fandom Podcast Network family. You and Mark are doing a great job, and it's nice to be part of it. And I love talking Trek, man. I'm a huge fan, and I'm really excited about this new series.
Yeah,
Kyle.
exactly. You guys have been doing a phenomenal job here. We love having you guys here talking Star Trek, and I think the only thing I got else to say is it's warp time.
All right, folks, we're going to love you and leave you and hit to warp ourselves here on the Making Treks Enterprise. And as we bow out, I want to thank you all for being on and all out there for listening tonight. We'll catch you next time on Tuesdays here at Trek Tuesday on FPN. So long and ta-da for now.
Be sure to stay tuned for Mondays here on FBN, where you'll catch this amazing show. I'm sitting here waiting, contemplating what's the best day. Watching